Poetry Center, bringing poetry to Paterson since 1980 at Passaic County Community College.
Hi, I'm Michelle Lerner, and I have the honor of introducing Lisa Cole Nicolaou. I just want to say first that I'm really grateful to be a part of the foundation and to Barry for starting it. It's really helped keep Laura alive for me. Every time we have a board meeting over Zoom, I feel like she's there. And in fact, one time during a board meeting, I had to search my email for something logistical that didn't specifically have to do with Laura. And the first thing that came up in my email, for some reason, was an email from her. And, you can see the beginning of the email and the list, and it was just her asking me how I was and what I was doing right then. And I was so overcome by feeling like she was there, I couldn't even talk for a while. And Barry said that she used to say I was the daughter she never had, and I felt like she was a second mother, except the kind that I could talk to and who actually read my writing. But after I actually got to know Barry after Laura's death and realized what it was like for him as her actual child to sit and listen to her actual poetry, I realized that our relationship was maybe something different than her being like a mother to me. So Lisa Cole Nicolaou, a graduate of Yale University, is a lifelong educator and writer. For many years, she was the creative writing teacher at the Elizabeth Morrow School in Englewood, New Jersey, and pioneered the school's participation in the Scholastic Art and Writing Awards, which resulted in over 80 regional and national awards. She was a recipient of a Scholastic Art and Writing Teaching Award and was named to the Educator Advisory Panel. Her poetry and prose have been published in Oprah Magazine, Lips, Paterson Literary Review, and other journals. Something Whole from Something Broken is her manuscript that was selected as a finalist.
Well, it's really an honor to be here celebrating Laura in, a room that feels like home. I have my family here, my friends. My mother, who remembers I went to speech class because I was afraid to talk in front of people, something most people don't know about me, so there you go. But I will get it together. See, I learned you have to breathe in and breathe out, and then you're okay. That was 6 years of speech lessons. See, we're all full of secrets, and I feel a great sense of connection to my friends, my family, the foundation, my poetry teachers, of course, Maria, and as I told Edwin, he was actually my second poetry teacher. I took a workshop with him at Dodge. I took my first workshop with Laura. And
me too.
Yes, and I'm only here really because my daughter won a writing award, and that's where I learned about Spring and Fountain. So, and that's what really brought me to this other door, because we all need, life is full of miracles and connections, and our paths are never really straight, or at least mine wasn't, so it's wonderful to be here. See, my speech teacher would be proud of me. I got it together. I need to raise the microphone. She used to give me a soda, though. That's how she got me to go to speech class. So that's, maybe my mother doesn't know that story. So like Tony, I will say my first poem was published by Lips, and but Laura was really tough. And there were many years when Laura didn't accept my poems, and her reasons were really wonderful. I mean, she was incredibly kind, but she had incredibly high standards. And the last time I submitted to Lips, she said, "I like these poems, Lisa, but I really like that poem you read." And she said exactly what it was, and she said, "I'd really like to have that poem." And she listed all the reasons why. So when I was trying to decide which poems to read today, I really picked ones that Laura chose. This is also a pandemic poem. Offerings 2020. At 17, my grandmother sailed from Puerto Rico and arrived at New York Harbor along with the Spanish flu. Her skin turned ghostly blue as she received last rites, but miraculously she survived and spent her remaining 70 years wheezing while giving her love to all of us, especially to me, the youngest of the lot. This March, I put away my tote bags, my schedules, donned an apron, and started to speak to my grandmother. I remember her cooking tricks: save the onion skins and carrot shavings, break the eggs with tenderness, and whisk them gently, recalling how she presented each dish to us like an offering. I wake early these mornings, listen to the birds outside my window, crack the eggs with care, slide the yellow orb onto a plate, present it to my beloved daughters. Here, I whisper, is something whole, made from something broken. I think this, I joined Maria's writing group, and two women in the group asked me to be in a group with them, and I thought, I can't be in a group with them. I'm not a real poet. And I really just want to say thank you because they helped me so much. And I wrote this poem in this group because one of the women, Eileen and Diana are their names, Eileen gave this as the prompt: "My true religion is kindness," by the Dalai Lama. When I was a child, I believed that God lived down the alleyway. When we visited my great-grandmother for our weekly lunch, my mother and brother and I would cross to the other side of Broadway. I insisted on holding my brother's hand as we crossed the wide avenue, stopping halfway to watch the old men in hats feeding the pigeons scraps of bread. As we approached my great-grandmother's building, I let go of his tight grip so that I could race ahead and stare at the light emanating from the narrow shaft. Each week we would visit and enter the apartment building, the smell of chicken soup and struggle filling the lobby, and take the elevator to the top floor. My great-grandmother, all smiles, despite a lifetime of work as a seamstress in the sweatshops, would lead us past the pristine living room with a bowl of plastic fruit on the coffee table to her tiny kitchen in the back. She would perch on her stool, and I would rush to my seat by the window, where we would eat what we called leftovers, but what I learned 40 years later was called cholent, a soup favored by Eastern European Jews. While I slurped and fiddled with the secret drawer under the linoleum table, I looked down the shaft and felt a sense of safety despite the long drop. When we moved from New York and I met the neighborhood children, they asked me what I was. I have been wondering about that ever since. I told them I was Protestant. In my child's mind, cats were female and dogs were male, and one Jewish mother and one Catholic father, though lapsed, made me a Protestant. I never met a real Protestant until I went to college in a rarefied Ivy world. By then, my memories of alleyways were faint. I learned what it was like to not feel safe, and I could have used a little of my great-grandmother's spirit and soup to cope with the coldness of that world. On those Sundays when my husband insists, I go with him to church, a world of chanting and incense. I look at the faces of the saints, their mournful expressions, and I try to care. But it's only at the coffee hour, when I see the smiles of the old ladies who serve the coffee, that my heart fills with long-lost hope. And for a moment, I am not in the church, but back at the alleyway, a little girl who loved her brother and who knew where God lived. Wow. Like many people in this room, I was a teacher, and my daughter is a teacher. And I wrote this poem actually in the Poetry Center during one of the workshops. And I think, yes, this was also in Lips, but I didn't get to read it, so I'm very happy to read it now. Classroom Reverie. Of course I made mistakes, left chapters untaught, forgot the attendance report, but I remember the way the sunlight reached our quiet reading time after lunch. Streaked blackboards, never as pristine as the principal insisted, notices pinned askew, the certainty of safety waiting when we pushed open the double door after recess. Recess, a word forgotten, like plumes for pens. That small slice of time we counted on, the only time when James would smile. At 10, he seethed, made some swoon, the hint of a shadow across his face we thought was anger, but learned 5 years later was the crawling crab of cancer. He lives in that classroom, cramped in his too small desk, the largest one I could find. On the last day of school, a humid monster in late June, a woodpecker flew in the open window and James pulled out his bird guide, confirmed the extremely rare species. In quiet camaraderie, we gazed upward, hypnotized by the tiny mechanical motions of the bird as it pecked at the ceiling of our classroom, creating perfect punctuation marks to the still life of our year. Well, I have a lot of family here, so they'll recognize some of this. So, we are allowed to change certain things. So, in full disclosure, Carmen was my grandmother's sister, but I like the sound of cousin Carmen. So I made Carmen a sister. So I just want to say to my family, don't tell me I'm wrong. I'm the youngest of the cousins, and sensitive, so we're allowed to do that. We're allowed to tell the truth, but tell it slant, and we know who said that. So this is, and my daughters are here too, so sorry kids. This is Letter to My Future Granddaughter, Part 1, 1918. At 17, I sailed to New York, leaving my beloved home of Lares, a village in the Green Mountains of Puerto Rico, my 2 sisters, and my cousin Carmen, who 2 summers before disturbed a nest of wasps, though I told her again and again to leave it alone. But Carmen was defiant and difficult, and I was the only one who could tame her. On the ship, I worried and wondered what would be waiting for me in New York, how cousin Carmen could survive without me. I felt the pain again from the welts on my skin, remembered how the wasps formed a wavy wall as they enveloped us, how I covered Carmen's body with mine to save her sweet skin. A priest came, and in my fevered dreams, I remember the last rites I received, my cousin crying, my mother spooning broth from a doll's spoon into my open mouth. With fear in me extinguished, I offered to sail to the city, an English dictionary in my bag, a promise of a job with a friend's family, caring for 3 children, the hope to earn enough money to keep the family farm and return to the green hills of Lares. I sailed into the harbor in the fall of 1918, arriving with the Spanish flu. Part 2, 2020. Given the fact that the world is melting and an invisible virus is killing by the thousands, and my daughters, in their childbearing years, are back at home, living in their childhood bedrooms, you may never be a part of this world. But if by some miracle you are born, here are some things to remember. Your great-great-grandmother survived the Spanish flu. A priest came to give her last rites twice, the first when she received hundreds of wasp bites. She used to tell me that story when I was a little girl and sing to me in her thick accent, her little bedroom, my safe haven, where I felt enveloped in the cocoon of her love. She struggled with asthma, endured a cruel mother-in-law and a silent husband, suffered from migraines, but she just kept living, pushing through difficult days, rushing to her galley kitchen to find a way to nourish us. When the world shut down in 2020, I put on an apron and started to talk to my grandmother. I remembered her cooking tricks, saved the bones and scraps for broth, looked out the window, and searched for a hopeful sign. These long and difficult months, we waited for the disgraceful man to leave the White House. We waited for a vaccine to save us. The four of us sat in our little den like a small boat against a big storm, hoping we would reach solid ground. I wondered if there was even a possibility that you would someday enter our world, given the climate issues and the political strife, and your possible mother and aunt living as exiles from their young lives. And all the while, I thought of my grandmother, what she had endured, what she had survived. May you inherit a kernel of her courage. May you carry her kindness in your bones. Reaching for a ring. When I think of first grade, I remember grasping a shower ring, shiny metal repurposed to hold, reading words on colored cardboard. Miss Tanis, my magical teacher, managed to call each of us to her desk every day to sound out and read a new word. We never knew when the moment would come, sometimes right after the pledge, sometimes during craft time, the smell of plasticine and glue permeating the air. Whenever it happened, I was ready, eager to rush to Miss Tanis's desk to sound out my word. I loved to watch as she delicately affixed a star on my name card and attached my new word to the ring. Soon, it was thick with words, and the stars covered both sides of my card, creating a personal galaxy. In that cramped classroom, with small windows that allowed only a slant of light, I felt a sense of sacredness that I recognized years later at holy and ancient sites. 10 years ago, I sat in a basement room at the Hackensack Library after wavering and then joining my first poetry workshop. The room was small and dim, and yet, when Laura Boss started to speak, I felt the feeling of safety and hope that I knew from first grade. When I was least expecting it and most needing it, Laura handed me an invisible ring. Her comments, like the star stickers that Miss Tanis so carefully placed around my name.